Hey there. Hi.
Hi. Thank you, Praveen. Thanks for agreeing to do the session. So, thank you all for joining. So, people who joined in both on Zoom and YouTube. So, about Praveen is a principal engineer at Wise in Hyderabad. So, in addition to that, he is also VJS organizer for Hyderabad community, and he also has sound knowledge in CSS and JavaScript. So, thank you, Praveen, once again for taking time for doing this session. So, over to you.
Hey. Thanks, Rajiv. I think you have pretty much said everything that I had for introduction. But by the way, if you looked at the poster and now you're looking at me and feel cheated because I look like a different person, it's not. I'm the same person that's there on the poster. I'm gonna start with this one thing that the best way to learn JavaScript is not to learn it at all. But I mean, that's just a joke around there. But then we all do JavaScript all day in, day out to get our job done and get our wallets filled, right? So it's pretty much important that any tool that you use, you if you have tips and tricks about them, it's just gonna make your job easier along the go. So what I have done here is I've compiled basically a list of things that I have personally found to be interesting, and I end up using them. And I hope that this also helps the people who are just watching this now. So here's me. I work, as you said, I work at a company called Voicen. Voicen is a AI ML startup where we do a lot of speech analysis and provide analytics on the same. And if you're interested, maybe you can talk to me over Twitter and all the other folks over on Voicen on Twitter. I also am a co-organizer of View Hyderabad, and it has been going really well. So if you are from Hyderabad or you're planning to come down to Hyderabad after this lockdown, when we organize a meetup, do meet me. And if you want to present, just let me know. I'm available on CodePen, Twitter, and all the other places as Praveen Puglia, at the rate Praveen Puglia. And that's just my little website. So I'm just going to go over for a split second to this site where I show some of the stuff that I have. So I write a blog here if you want to follow things, but I don't write it that often. Maybe good time for us to, for me to just do something here. I also built small things like these games. So because we were all playing too much Tambola here, I made a ticket generator and board and similar stuff I do, like creating these flags with empty divs and just CSS and nothing else. So I do a lot of stuff like that. I also am available on CodePen where I do a lot of CSS stuff. So it's been a long while where I've done something like this crazy, but yeah, I still do some things there. And now I'll get back to the presentation. So that's me. And let's just dive right into the tricks because there are a lot of them. And at some point, if you have questions, I'll just ask them around. I'll probably try to answer them through the chat itself. So the browser is the thing that we all work with. And there are a lot of tips and tricks around browsers, and you can find them all over the internet. But then the ones that I really find interesting are here as follows: dollar, double dollars, and dollar zero. So say I'm here on this website, and all I want to do is find out a particular element. You can definitely go here and choose and find your way and all of that. But then there are things that you can do here to make your process faster. For an example, if you're in Chrome DevTools, you can just write a selector here. For an example, SVG, and it'll instead of just finding it, it will also find the elements that are SVG. So let me just try to find something that has a class, for example, this, and you can take this, put a dot color inherit, and we'll start selecting elements that matches the selector. So that's the first thing. If you want to do it in console, however, you can just do dollar. If you remember jQuery, yeah, you will probably remember what dollar does. And in browsers, it's available by default. Although it's not jQuery, it's just a document shortcut for document.query selector. So that's how you get the first element that matches that selector. Now, what if you want all the elements that match that selector, right? All you have to do is the same thing, but then do double dollars. And now you have all the links that match that class, right? Also, if you notice, if you go to elements panel and just start clicking on any of those, at this side, you see something called $0. And if you hover over it, says you can use $0 in console to refer to this element. So we'll go to console and do exactly that. And there you have. So if you are working with some element, if you want to try get a reference of that element in the console, you can just select that element in inspect panel and then just do $0 everywhere, and you'll have a reference to it. So that's the first thing out of the cards, the tricks. And then we have some stuff for console. So now in console, you can do a lot of stuff, but I'm just going to cover a few of them that I use pretty much all day in, day out. So the first thing that you can do in console is, say you have a record like this, where users uh, equals to, and we have an object called name, Praveen maybe, and then we have another object that has name, right? And say bad guy, right? Now it's if you do console.log, you can definitely check out what those are, and but then it's not that easy to see all of them at one place, especially if they have a lot of properties in them. So what you can do is you can do console.table, and then you can do users. And this is great to see the responses. That, for example, you got a response for your blog post and you want to see them as proper database records. So you can do this. And the best part is that you can sort them here as well. Right? So that's what you can do with console. There are other things you can do. For example, so say you have a big JSON response. And for that, we'll just go here. We are going to just do this. So let me just try this. Right? Basically, if we do that, console.log and then JSON. Now this here is a big JSON that you get from the JSON placeholder API, right? Now, how do you copy this over to your code editor if you want to? Now, one way could be, well, just take everything that comes in here and then, well, you can JSON stringify it. So console.log and then JSON.stringify and then put in JSON here, right? And then you get everything that comes as a string, take it to the editor, and then just parse it again, right? In the editor using some tool. Instead of that, you can just go to this guy where we had this, say is users is our sample response, right? So what we can do is when we are fetching, we can just say copy, which is available in console, and say users. So now you have everything, the entire user object copied to your clipboard. And if I paste it, you'll see it comes in like that, right? So any response that you get from server or any big object that you want to copy from your console, maybe you are debugging and you want to copy over the entire object, you can just use copy in your console and then pass in the object and it will be copied to your clipboard and you can directly paste it in anywhere. So that's the copy part. Yeah. And uh, uh,
Praveen, can you please mute everybody or remove them?
hey, Yogesh, can you do that, please?
I'll do that, please.
Okay. All right. So the next thing is in console, maybe you are writing your own log messages for your application and you want to highlight them in a different way. So what you can do in console quickly is instead of just putting in your message, you can also style it in different way. And what you can do is pass %c and then write your message, hello world, maybe, and then pass in a string here that is going to apply some style to this entire part. So what we are going to do is say background red, color white, and then maybe pairing of one. Okay? So anything that you can use in CSS, you can use here. And now you see the console, your message in console is formatted. You can use pretty much any CSS that you want here. You can use shadows, you can use cards, and that will make your log messages more meaningful, help you make them. The last thing I want to talk about in console is, for example, say you received a large response from network, right? And you want to, or maybe you're debugging in your code and you want to indicate which one, well, what am I even logging? Uh, One way to do it would be, let me go here. One way to do it would be console.log, well, uh, users, and you just see an array, right? But then you don't know that this is users. And this is especially useful when you look at, for example, your console logging multiple times in your code, and then you want to figure out which one was what. Okay? So what you can do is console.log and then wrap this into an object, right? A simple plain object. And what this will do is it will just mark it here with the name. So now you know, well, we logged users instead of just an array of all the users. Right? This is helpful to know, especially when you're doing a multiple console log statements. So that covers our console stuff part. Now I'm going to go to this part, which is copy, inspect, and code debug. And I happen to have covered copy already. So I'm just going to go to inspect. So say you have a reference to an element in your code, but then you want to visually inspect it. So how do you, the way to visually inspect in your browser is basically taking this inspector and then following, going over some element and clicking it, and then it appears in the elements panel, right? If you would want to do that programmatically, what you can do is, say, for example, we want to highlight this guy. So we have $0 here. What we can do is just say inspect $0. And the moment we do that, you see everything in here that this guy got inspected, this guy got highlighted here, and the elements panel automatically opened up, right? So it helps in a lot of time when you're hovering over things and you get an element reference and you want to just inspect that element automatically. This helps basically. Uh, the next thing that we want to cover up is you can, by the way, if you did not know, you can encode and decode stuff as base64 in your browser itself. The functions are funny. So say for example, if you do B2A and want to say, well, I have my name, I got a base64 encoded string. And you can do A to B and pass that string itself to uh, get your string back, right? You can do that in browser. You don't need to go to some online decoder and do it. Those functions are just there. And a lot of the time we receive tokens and a lot of stuff that are base64 encoded, so you can use them. And the next thing that I want to cover is probably a usage that helps us out in scraping things off of the web page that we are on. So for example, say I want to get this icon, right? And what I want to do is I want to find out, well, um, I want to copy the SVG that's there for this icon. So what I can do is I can go to console. I can select this guy. So now that is available as $0. So $0 is this guy. It's making sure. And then all we have to do is basically create a string, which is data, which is a data URL, and then I'll just show it here. You can pass it the entire SVG that you've copied from the DOM. You can pass it on here as data image XML and then send that URL to anybody. And when they open that URL up, they'll have the icon available with them. Now, you can, if you want to do that from your code, instead of just not going to console and inspecting things out, what you can do is uh, grab the selector for it. For example, here, right? You can grab this. You can also do document.query selector, right? Uh, Pass in the class, and then call outer HTML. Now we all know that how inner HTML works. It gives the stuff that's inside the HTML, but outer HTML gives you the element itself, along with all its descendants. So you can take this and now you can make your string and pass it on to anybody. That's what covers this slide. Now I'll move on to another thing that a lot of the time we do is basically um, trying to figure out whether something was clicked or something was clicked inside of a box or you clicked outside of a box. And this is required when you're developing things like a drawer or maybe a dialog or something else that you want there to be on the screen if you click inside of them or do something within that. But then you want to close them as soon as you are done. Maybe you're clicking outside indicating that you're done, or maybe you just want to discard it. So there are two ways to do it. One way would be to click anywhere and then check, well, is this the element, or is this element inside of my container that I'm looking for? For example, I clicked a button inside a drawer, and then you have to check whether is one of the parent the drawer. If it is so, then I will just go ahead and not close the drawer. But then the other way to do it is checking wherever you click whether that's uh, that's a drawer itself or the element within the drawer. And I think that's a better way to approach it, because browser automatically gives us a function called contains. And in the code, you can see that I'm listening to a click event on the document, and I'm just checking whether the drawer element itself contains the target or not. Now, the contains doesn't work in the sense that it only looks for children in that. Contains also check whether the target is also the drawer itself or not. So this gets you covered on the part whether when you're checking the element itself or all of its descendant, right? So this gets your job done. All right, I'll move on to the next part, which is query parameters. And when we are dealing with URLs, there are a lot of things important. Example, the normal parameters, the subparts of the URL, the host and port and everything. And finding those things is relatively easy. For example, if I'm here in this place, I can just do window.location, and this gives me a fair bit of information about, well, the path name is this, the host is this, protocol is this. But then if you look at the search string, it's not in a form where I can use. Now, to use this, what I would rather have to do is something like window.location dot search, and then split it using the ampersand sign, because that's how we split it. So we get, well, uh, basically two parts. But then you see, well, filters should have probably come like an array of A and B instead of just two separate strings, right? So you end up with a lot of these cases, and then you write maybe a parser to parse the entire URL. So instead of doing all of that, all you can do is basically create a variable called params equals to you new URL search params, and then pass in the window.location.search that we have seen before. This is basically the parser for all the search parameters that are passed into URL. And now you've checked params dot get all. Say maybe I want to check, well, does it have filters? Well, it has filters, and I got the values as an array, which is more than ideal. Maybe I want to check whether the params contain something in the URL or not. So I can do has and then say, well, does it have search? It has search, and then I can do something about it. If you work with Vue or React or any of these things, there are routers in the ecosystem which make use of this function a lot. So maybe it is something that's definitely worth checking out. So that's there for you. Next, and this is really nice trick. It's not even. I mean, I found it up on the internet by somebody called Guy Bedford. You can follow him on Twitter. And this is really, really neat. So say what I want to do, and let me just show you another trick. If you want a blank blank tab just to play around with, you can just go to your browser tab and say about blank, and you'll get a blank canvas. But here I want to do something. For example, I want to get a library directly from npm and want to use it in browser, right? The way you would currently do it is probably create a project and then do npm install whatever module you want to use, and then probably serve it through HTTP server some sort and all of that chatting. But you don't need to do all of that. All you can do is something like this. So await. Um, Let me just try this. Just for an example, this library. I want to use this library, and this library is now loaded for me, right? And it's a small library to check for your password. So now I can do ZXCVBN and see, oh, well, it's not available. Maybe it hasn't exposed it. Let me just try jQuery. Okay, so jQuery is now available, as you can see. And now we can do something like this, jQuery document. Oh, well, let me, is my internet there working fine? Okay, let me just try it here. App.jsp jQuery. We have jQuery. I'm not sure why it isn't working right now, but you should be able to do something like this. Maybe the module isn't being sent from JSPN. But yeah, if you're on browser and if you want to get any module from npm directly on your browser to play around with, you can just do this. Let's move on to the world too. We all deal with JSON a lot, and I think most of the stuff that I am going to discuss here is.
Praveen, is the backend noise from your side?
Sorry.
Backside, some noise is there, right?
Yeah, I guess if you can give me a second, I can just close the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's basically a lot of plumbing work going on. I think you'll still see a little bit of, you'll hear.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the world of JSON. Now, JSON is something that we all use a lot. And um, while we know most of how it works, there are some things maybe you haven't tried. So I'll just cover up that. So cheap copy. This is pretty straightforward, and I think a lot of people have used it. So you have an object, and you want to in your code, well, just to make a copy of it instead of trying to. And it may be a nested data that you get from server that has maybe a user object and then an address object inside it and stuff like that. So if you want to quickly just copy that, you can use JSON parse and then JSON stringify all together, and you get a cheap copy of it. What you have to remember is that it only works when the data that you are parsing is JSON friendly, and it doesn't work for things that have, for example, a JavaScript object that has functions in that. It doesn't work for that. So for I think server responses, this is just fine to copy it. Right? The next thing that I want to cover is prettify. Now, JSON stringify is good, but then it goes bad. I mean, when you want to use it in a meaningful way. For example, we have we were here and we had our users here. Right? Now, if I want to do JSON stringify, or maybe show it in a code editor, maybe something like Monaco editor or TinyMCA, we want to all we want to do is we want to format it nicely, right? But with JSON stringify by default puts it all in the same line. But that's not what we want. We want it to be formatted or maybe indented in the proper way. So what we can do is JSON.stringify and then pass in our users and pass in null as the second argument. And I'll come back to what that null is, and that also is useful. But as a third argument, you can pass in two. And now you see that our JSON is formatted according to the way we want. And you can probably feed this string as your model to your code editor component or somewhere you want to show it to the user, and that will be nice. Uh, so that's here. The next thing is we can filter out properties from JSON when we are creating strings out of it. For an example, say our users is a really large object, and let me add something to our users. So users is basically now name, uh, Praveen, and maybe age is 28, and maybe we want to have another object here, like, and then say age 20, and maybe I'll say raw. Right? So all we want to get from this object is just the name maybe. So what we can do is we can do JSON.stringify and then pass in users and also pass in an array of all the keys that we want to whitelist from the JSON. So here I can say name, and you see name is coming up here, and I can also pass in 2 to format it correctly, and then I get a JSON like this. Now you can combine it with the technique that I have used earlier, which is JSON.parse, and then write this entire piece to get an object out of it, right? And then you can also wrap that around a copy function here to get it copied to your clipboard like this as a JavaScript object, right? So that so all of these tricks, now you see some of them you can combine and be even more productive when you use it. All right, so let's move on to the language, which is the World 3 and last of our words. But it has a ton of things to cover, so let me just start straight. Swapping variables. I think a lot of people have done swapping variables in their college days using something like this. Well, having a equals to 10, b equals to 20, and then we want to swap those around. While we can do something like this, temp equals to a equals to b, and b equals to 10, which gets our job done, right? So now a is basically 20 and b is basically 10. If you are using a modern browser and a modern environment, something like ES6, all you can do is a comma b equals to b comma a. Now this is called destructuring. We are destructuring a and b both, and then we are assigning them the reverse values of those. So you can keep doing it, and you can see that their values are getting swapped. Okay? So this is much shorter than using a temp variable, and this is also neat, pretty neat. So swapping variables, and a real world use case might look like this, where you're sorting element, probably using sort, different, maybe merge sort or other sorting algorithm. You're writing something like this. There you can use it. Pure objects. So we know that we can create objects using something like this, right? But so where obj equals to this. But then this isn't the purest of object that you can get in JavaScript, because when you say obj dot, you see a lot of stuff there, right? Has own property and all of these things that come up, right? But then think about this. If you are creating maybe a map for strings of, for example, for I18N, you want to create a map of maybe name should be called something like name, or in other language it might be called something else. You don't need any of these things like has on property and all of those things. All you need is simple map where you can just pass in key and get the value. For those cases, you can have a lighter version of object, which is where obj equals to object.create new, object.create, and then this. And now if you look at object, there is nothing, because we don't have anything in the object itself, and it doesn't inherit anything from the top level object constructor. So now we can just put in anything in here. So object.name equals to name. Well, that's the only thing that's going to be there in the object. It's pretty lightweight, and it also works with things like object.keys maybe. So you are not losing out on much, but you are getting a much lighter version of an object, right? So object.keys, object values, all of those things work nice in this. So that's pure objects. Let me go through this fast as well. So repeating strings, and this reminds me of a funny incident where I used to work in a for a financial client, and then they wanted to have a table where they show a summary, and on the left side they wanted to keep some text, on the right side of the screen they wanted to keep the amount or something, and in between they wanted a series of dotted lines, right? And the number of dotted lines were also pretty much told to us. Well, we want 20 dots there in there because the width and layout is fixed. So when we did not have ES6, the way to go, and the CSS wasn't good as well, and this is a long time back. The way you can do this in JavaScript is probably by running a for loop where you from I equals to 0, I less than 20, and I plus plus, and then go ahead and print it out, right? But with advent of ES6 or using different techniques, you can do this in a much better way. For example, you can just do new array 20 dot fill dot and then just join them. Okay. So basically, yeah, join them with nothing. By default, if you join, it joins with a comma. So that's not what you want. You join with an empty string. So now you have 20 dots there, but then you can do even better. And that's where we come in here, where we can just say any string dot repeat and how many times you want to repeat it. So we can just say, well, dot repeat, dot repeat. Maybe 100 maybe. Yeah, that's fine. So we can repeat n number of strings using the string repeat function. Uh, Now getting the last elements of an array. Now, a lot of the times when you want to say maybe just slice say last 10 items. For example, I created this board where I'm showing previous n numbers, right? When I pick numbers and I want to show well previous 8 numbers in here, I want to get the last 8 numbers and probably also reverse them in order as well, right? That's what we want to do because I'm pushing elements into the checked array, right? So how do we do that? Now, one way to do that would be maybe running a loop again for this, and then start with I equals to array.length, and then I is less than maybe I is uh, greater than array.length minus 10 because we want 10 items, and this is going to be minus 1, and then greater than equals to, and run a loop something like run a loop like this, and then you can basically get each item, put it in an array, and get all of this done. But that's ugly, really ugly. I mean, you shouldn't have to run through a loop to get this done. What you can do, however, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you want the last couple of items, all you have to do is basically this dot slice and give a negative index. So I want last 3 item, I'm just going to give slice -3, and that will cover it. Right? The next thing is getting unique values from array. Now, say you have an array like this: 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 5, 6, maybe 42. I'll let it be 40. So what I want is all the unique items from the array, which are again 1, 2, 3, 42, 5, 6, because there are 2 3s here. Maybe let's just put another 5 here. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 42, 6, all of those things. So the way, again, you could run a loop for each item, you check whether it exists in another array or not. If it doesn't, you push it to another array and then just get it over with. Or what you can do is you can take that array that you have. So let's take that one, and let's call it where ARR. And what we can do is unique equals to use the spread operator with a set, new set, and then pass in your array. And now you have all the unique items in your array, right? This is as simple as it gets. So all we are doing is making a new set out of array, and set removes all the duplicate items. And then we are spreading that set into a new array again, like this. So again, deleting last couple of items. So if we have an array, again, this is our ARR, and we want to remove, say, the last item from the array, all we have to do is array.pop, right? And it tells you that how, it tells you basically things that are removed, right? And if you look at ARR now, it has lesser elements. But then what if you want to remove 10 elements from it, or maybe last couple of elements from it? The way again would be to, well, find out from the end, run a loop and just keep on deleting until you hit your counter, that n number of items that you want to delete. Or you can just shorten the length of the array. For example, here the length of the array is 7. If I want to delete the last two, all I have to do is array.length equals to 5, and the last two items will be deleted from the array. All right. So that's another trick that's used a lot of times in practical world usage as well. And the next thing again is something that I have pretty much used almost every day with arrays is removing things that are false. So for example, you have 1, 0, null, undefined. Maybe you also have 3, you have false, you have true. Now, all we want is basically all the truthy values. For example, 1 is truthy, but 0 is not. 0 is a falsy value, and null is falsy, and undefined is also falsy. So what I want to do is basically filter out all of them. So either you can do this and then write your filter logic saying, well, if this is my item and item is not null, item is not undefined, item this and item that, blah, blah. But then all you can do here is pass in the Boolean constructor. And there you have it. You will have your filtered array where everything is a truthy value. Right? Am I audible clearly? I see something in here. Yes, okay, all right. So let's move on to the next one. So we have filtered our arrays to falsy stuff, and now required parameters. Now, in TypeScript world, when you want something to be required, you can make it required by saying, well, uh, uh, well, this has to be provided. Just by the function definition itself, it becomes required. So you have something like function color, maybe function get code, and then your pass, I don't know, maybe your color. In TypeScript world, that color function, that color argument automatically becomes required. But how do you do it in JavaScript? Well, in JavaScript, you can use this function and say, if color, if not color, then maybe throw in, throw new error that color is required, right? Something like this. So, but then, and let's say, let's just try this out so we can see it working. It obviously throws an error, right? So that check is done. But then, what if you have multiple arguments here? How do you make sure you have make all of them as required parameters if you wanted to, or selectively if you wanted to make them required? So what you can do is create a function called required. So let me make something like required equals to a function that just throw new error argument is some argument, it is required, right? Or maybe we can take the name of the argument. So and then what we can do is the name is required. What we can do now is we can do function get color and then say color equals to required, and then execute this function, and then write console.log whatever is color. Now if we try to run get color, you see, well, we did not pass anything, so we can also alter this. Say we'll just say required color. And now if we run this function, we say color is required. That is coming up. And now you can take this function, and for any argument that you want to make required in the JavaScript line, you can just pass in this function. The way it works is by because it is a default value. If we don't provide any value to our function when it is called, that value is automatically taken. And when we talk about this value, it's just a function executed that throws an error. So that throws an error, and your program also stops working at that moment. So this gets your job done uh, in terms of required arguments in your functions. All right. So you can do this. Here we have an example of a render function basically. Tag template literals. So I wish this was more of an interactive session where I'm asking questions and people are answering some of these, but then we can't just make people go and speak because a lot of them will have noise. So I'll have to do it this way. I'm assuming that a lot of people are coming from React background and they have heard about things like style components. And one of the great things about style components is that, well, you can do something like styled dot button, and then pass in basically you pass in some CSS and it gives you a button, basically a React button that you can use, and maybe you can pass in props and do a lot of crazy things with it. But how does it work? How does this sort of syntax give you a button with the styles that you passed in? So let's look at that. Now, let me create an object called style equals to this. And inside style, I want to create a function. Basically, you want to create a property called button that is the function. Now, for now, all I'm going to do is inside this, I'm going to just console.log the arguments that we receive to this function. Okay. What we can do is we can take a function and then we can pass a template string around it, and that syntax calls the function itself with a couple of arguments. So for example, what we can do is where button equals to style dot button, and when we pass in, and this is template strings, right? So when we do this, or maybe say home, you see this function got called and got locked, right? And when we look at the arguments, the first argument is an array where whatever we have passed in the template string has come up. So we passed home, home came up here, right? Well, that sounds interesting because we can take this because since it's calling a function and then return anything that we want. So let's modify our style button function and do something crazy. So let's say dot button equals to function, and let's say we are going to take in styles and we are going to create a DOM element out of it here. So const maybe element equals document dot create element, and we want to create a button, right? And we want to what we want to do is anything that the user has passed in, we want to apply that as the style of the button. And we just saw that the first thing in the argument is an array that contains whatever we passed, right? So we can come up here and say, well, element dot set attribute, and then say style, and then take the first item from the array. In this case, that is going to be home, but when we pass in, we can pass anything that we want as string. And then we want to return the element from this function, right? So now our style button function is ready. And what we can do is we can go ahead and create my button equals to style dot button, and then pass in, well, background red, color white, and maybe padding 1 rem, right? And this gives us, if you look at, a button which has all those styles, right? What we can do now is you can do my button dot inner text, maybe inner text equals to hello GUVI, right? And then we can just say document.body.prepend, and then my button. So now you see that button coming up here. And that's just what we created using something like style.button. And that's, although that's absolutely basics of what style component does. That's a library by Max Turber. There are a lot of cases to cover, but that's the general principle on how that library works. So I would encourage you to go and check out more about this. You can, if you look at in template strings, we can pass in variables as well. For example, we can do something like, dollar this, dollar say button, something like this. And those also get passed as part of the arguments in the button function. So you can pass in pretty much anything, do some calculations, and then return a button that's even more complex. Maybe add some icons and stuff like that. So that's about tag template literals. Uh, the last two things I have is relatively something that that has come up here now. It's been in TypeScript for some time, but it has been made fully available in TypeScript 3.7, and that's something called null coalescing. And now a lot of languages, what they offer is that, for example, I have where user equals to say name, Praveen, and then say age isn't there, right? So let me also make it this. Now, if I try to do user.age.to uppercase, you can easily see that I'm going to get an error because obviously age doesn't exist in here. So a lot of the times when we are getting server responses from servers, they do not have the information that we require, or maybe they have something that we are not expecting them to have. Probably they're just null. So how do we handle them without throwing an error and crashing our entire application? For example, in this case, all I want to do is if the age is not there, I want to say I want to just put out a string saying age isn't available. So the way that we can do is say I want to say age equals to user.age, and then use an operator like this, which is a double question mark, right? I hope all of you can see it. Let me just increase the font, and then say age not available. Right? So now if you look at age, you see age is not available. But if I go ahead and user.age equals to 28, and then check out, let me just execute this once again, you'll see age is now the number that we have. So this is called null coalescing. It's called null or nullish because it checks for both null and undefined. And if something is undefined, then it's going to short circuit and then use this guy. That we have given as the default fallback value. Right? And this is used in conjunction, basically in a lot of places with a feature called optional chaining. So let's come back here. And this is going to be the last trick that I show you today. So let's come back to our example where we have user equals to, again, Praveen, right? And say the user, say we were looking for the address object inside the user. So the way we could do it is basically user dot address dot, or maybe we're just looking for the first line of the address, first line. Now, if you do this, it will say that first line, of undefined cannot be found because we know address doesn't exist in the user object. But how do we avoid this? Like, how do we again fall back to a value, something like address is not available, or that sort of string when we are looking maybe at 3 levels down or 4 levels down, maybe something like user dot address dot street dot first line, something like that. And all of those don't exist. So what we can do is either you can use something like Lodash, and this allows me to move to Lodash. Yeah. So if people use Lodash, there is, and the nice thing about Lodash website is if you go there and go to console, Lodash is available for you to play around. You can use a utility called user.get, and you can pass in an object, which is our user, and then pass what you want, maybe things like address dot street dot first name, and then pass in a fallback value. Address is unavailable. So what this will do is basically try to find user dot address dot street dot first name. If it can't find it, it will just return address is unavailable, right? But then you can do this now natively in your JavaScript language. So what you can do is, instead of this, you can do user dot question mark dot address, again question mark dot street question mark dot first line, and then combine it with null coalescing and saying uh, address is unavailable, right? So once you do that, what happens is if something is undefined or null along this entire chain, it short circuits the entire thing and returns undefined. And when undefined is before the nullish coalescing operator, it takes in whatever we have given as the fallback value. So now if we do this, we see address unavailable without throwing an error. Well, we're trying to access first line of undefined or stuff like that. So I hope this gives you a way to get rid of a lot of the things that you do with Lodash, or maybe a lot of other utilities that you are probably using now in your tool chain, and just use the tricks that I have shown you with respect to browsers or JSON or maybe the language itself. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. And I think we can all take a break now. And I'll be open to questions. Yogesh, over to you.
Guys, if you have any questions, you can just ask Praveen. Yeah, we'll wait for a minute, Praveen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll wait for a minute.
I'm just going to check on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
No questions there. Yeah, I checked too.
Okay. All right. So see something. Can we get the PPT? Yes, you can get the PPT. After this is done, I'll share the PDF with Yogesh, and he can send it to all the people who participate.
Yeah, sure. I'll just share it as well.
Any other question, anyone? I think I took a little bit longer than 45 minutes.
That's not an issue, Praveen. So I think so. We don't have any questions. Okay, then we'll conclude. So thank you, Praveen. Thank you so much for your time. So it has been a really wonderful session. Even I enjoyed the session. So today we are concluding this 46 days webinar series. So we'll
Okay.
start a new series very soon. So thank you so much, Praveen, for your time. Thank you all the audience for joining. Thank you.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks so much. Thanks, Yogesh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.